Hello, guys. Welcome to the first episode of the All Things Christian Rock podcast. Today's first episode, we are going to be talking about Red's new album, Declaration. I got my younger brother here, and we're just going to have a general conversation about the album and Red as a band and their state. For anyone who has not subscribed to the YouTube channel, make sure to subscribe to that. If you are listening to this on Spotify, you can also hear it on YouTube. If you are listening to it on YouTube, you can also check it out on Spotify. Also, check the link in the description for the All Things Christian Rock Facebook page. I post there daily, as well as for the All Things Christian Rock Spotify playlist, where you can hear the top 50 Christian rock and metal songs. So let's just go ahead and jump into it. Like I said, I have my brother Steven in here with me. Steven, so they had released half of the record ahead of time. What did you think of that half as those songs were coming out? And then what do you think of the other half of the songs when they came afterwards?
Well, I certainly there wasn't a single song that I disliked or that I didn't care for. I thought that it's a little bit different from what Red usually has done before, and a little more, angry and aggressive. It's probably their heaviest album altogether.
Yeah, I would say
don't have a lot to say.
It's definitely their heaviest album. It's very new metal sounding. Like, a lot of the riffs kind of remind me of bands like Korn or Slipknot. And then every single song has screaming. It is a short album, but then there's also there's not really a slower song, unless you want to say The War We Made is probably the most chill song, and even it is, you can kind of bang your head to, and there's some screaming in it. Definitely a heavier endeavor. Did you think it was smart that they were, releasing so much of the album ahead of time? Or did you, or maybe wish they hadn't done that?
I don't think it was a bad thing to release so much of the album because, especially with how popular that songs like Sever had been getting, even before the album came out, I feel like it wasn't a bad idea. Maybe it helps people want to get the album.
Well, my issue, especially since the album is so short, I mean, I know that some of these songs carried over from the Evening Hate EP, which came out back in November. But even then, when the album's only 10 songs long and they release, 5 of the songs ahead of time, to me at least, when I sit down and I listen to the album from beginning to end for the first time, there's not as much mystery to it. I feel like I already know a lot of what to expect and what's going to come out of it. Is that something that, I listen to music differently than a lot of people, so my favorite way to listen to an album is just from beginning to end, all the way through, as an art form. And so when I hear an album for the first time, that's something I'm really excited about, and to see how that goes. Is that something that, does that bother you the same way it bothers me, that you already knew what was going to happen for half of the album?
I mean, I too like listening to albums all the way through, and I do kind of like the mystery behind it. I think I would have preferred, honestly, if they had released 1 or 2 songs less than they had, to have that kind of, mystery vibe that you said. But I don't think it was necessarily a bad thing or a bad move.
Okay. With that said, and maybe it's because of the mystery aspect of it, but when we sat down, we got the album in the mail a couple of days before it came out, because I had pre-ordered it. And maybe it's because of the mystery aspect of it, but I feel like a couple of my favorite songs on the album are new songs, songs that they didn't release ahead of time. Particularly, I'm thinking about tracks 2 and 3, Infidel and Cauterize. They're blistering heavy, but they've got some awesome string arrangements. How do you think the new songs compare to the songs that they all released? Do you think that the songs that they already released, the singles, do you think those? I mean, the idea of a single is to promote the album, give a good idea on what the album is going to sound like. try to get some radio play. Do you think that those are actually the best songs, or do you think that maybe one of the other songs from the other half of the album would be your favorite, and maybe why, if you have a favorite song?
I don't think I have a favorite song yet. I think it's a little too soon for me to say something like that. Um, I have a hard time even saying like what my favorite song from like Vessels from Starset is because I love the album so much and I really like this new album too. And I'm also just not familiar with the album because it's just came out and I only listened to all of it once. But I really liked a lot of the new songs. I don't necessarily think that the songs they released before they put out the whole album were better or worse because I feel like the album as a whole is just really good. And
So I want to get into some more like technical stuff behind the album real quick. So pretty much the entire album was just co-written by Anthony and Rob, who's their producer. He's produced all of their albums except for Release the Panic. And then there were a couple other songs that were like co-written with other people. But really, it's just those two people writing everything. And I'm not just talking about the music. I mean, yeah, the music, but then also the lyrics as well. And that's not uncommon for Red. Like if you look back at their other albums, like back when, what's his name? Jason Roche. When Jason Roche was in the band, he was like their primary songwriter. He did kind of everything. And now it kind of seems like Anthony has taken the reins on that. And also, side note, Anthony co-produced this record. I believe this is his like kind of production debut. I mean, he said in an interview with Loudwire that like Rob Graves is kind of like the unofficial extra member of Red because his production helps define their sound and he does a lot of the writing and stuff. But what do you think about Anthony kind of being like the primary songwriter? Based on this album, because this is, as far as I know, this is kind of like the best representation of him being the primary songwriter for a whole album. How do you think that affects them as a band just in general?
Well, I certainly don't think it's a bad thing, and I liked a lot of what they did with the guitars and strings on the album. I thought it was produced well and it sounded really good.
And David Davidson did the string arrangements on this record, and he did all of the strings except for on Gone, which I believe Rob Graves did on that record, and then he didn't do it on Release the Panic either.
Well, I mean, I've definitely liked what Jason Roche has done. I also really like which Armstrong is it that you were talking about?
Anthony.
Anthony, yes. I really like what he did with this album, and I think it sounds really good and quite different. But I don't think that's a bad thing at all.
Right. Yeah. So I think him as like kind of the primary songwriter at this point, Red is they're a lot more metal sounding than they used to be. And I know that like with Gone, they were trying to play with some new things and stuff, but then they kind of, with this record, I think they went back to more of what they were doing with like Of Beauty and Rage, and it's a lot more metal sounding. But which is cool with me, because I'm a big fan of metal. I'm a big fan of Red. But I gotta say, the big difference between Red, a few years ago when Jason Roche was their primary songwriter, fast forward to now with Anthony as their primary songwriter. Not only are they a lot heavier, but they've just kind of strayed away from doing slow material at all. And if you look back at a lot of like my favorite songs by Red, songs like Start Again, Never Be the Same, Let It Burn, Not Alone, like those are slower. Hold Me Now, like those are a lot of slower songs by Red. Not that those are like my all-time favorite Red songs, but they would be high on the list. And then on this album, there's not, like I said, there's not really any slow songs except for maybe you could say The War We Made, but I don't really think that's slow anyways. Do you think that hurts, maybe not Red as a whole, but the album listening process?
Not if you want something edgy. I don't know. I mean, I did think it was weird that they didn't really have a slow song on the album, but personally, I don't mind it. I do like their slower songs, like you said, but I mean, ultimately, I listen to Red to rock out and
Sure. And with that said, I think that maybe that's why it's a good thing that this album's so short. I mean, it's only 10 tracks.
Mhm.
And if you're going to, like, something that I've noticed a lot in like heavier music is like if it's going to be like really blistering heavy for the entire album, the album is generally like pretty short. And then if the album's going to be a little bit longer, then it fluctuates a little bit more. Like
Yeah.
my other favorite band is Demon Hunter, and they do that a lot where their albums are a little bit longer, but they have some songs that are really, really heavy, and then some songs that are really, really slow, and then some songs that are, various levels of in between. And that's just to help the listener stay interested, and it feels more like a ride as you're going through the record instead of just heavy, heavy, heavy all the way through. I also another kind of production side of things that I noticed when I was reading through the credits on here. Joe Rickards, who was their drummer from Innocence and Instinct until Release the Panic, I think. He mixed and mastered this record, as well as he co-wrote tracks 7 and 9, which I have to flip around to see what those are. The Victim and Only Fight, which are a couple of the new songs. I think they're pretty cool. And he's not in the band anymore, but he did mixing and mastering, and this is the first Red album that he's done that for. So I thought that was pretty cool too. And while we're on the note of drummers, this is, even though Dan Johnson, that's his name, right? Okay. Even though Dan Johnson's been in the band since of Beauty and Rage, kind of, he hasn't been able to officially become their drummer until the release of this record because of issues with their record label. But Red are independent now. They do not have a record label anymore. They're doing everything themselves. Which kind of opens up a lot of neat opportunities. I mean, for a while, there was a period of time where they thought that Red was going to break up because they didn't know if they would be able to do it without the support of the label. But I feel like they've got a system going for them that it's going to work out. It's something that they've talked about doing, and in that interview with Loudwire I mentioned already, Anthony mentioned that in the downtime they have because of the coronavirus and stuff, they're already writing a new Red project. Not like a traditional studio album, but something that will be under the name of Red. So, when they don't have a label to worry about and they can just kind of do whatever the heck they want. They can release new music whenever they want. They can do an EP every year for all they wanted. If they wanted to never make a traditional album again, they didn't have to. If they want to do a live album, they can do that without being too complicated. So, with all of those doors and opportunities open to them, is there something you'd like to see from Red, or do you kind of not want them to go that way? Do you want them to stick to the traditional, just a record every 2 or 3 years? Or are you cool with them just releasing crap whenever they feel like it?
I'd prefer that they'd release an album every few years. Just because it's just how it usually is. It's what I'm used to. But I don't know. When it comes to like if they do anything differently instrumentally, I can't complain. I don't have anything to say about that because I like what they're doing.
Yeah, but I mean, like, if they wanted to do this, like, say they wanted to make like 1 year, they wanted to do like an EP or something, and there's some more like electronic stuff, like from like Gone or Release the Panic, and then they wanted to do like 1 year they had an EP that was just like the heaviest stuff they've ever written. Like they have the freedom to do that, or maybe they do like an acoustic album or a remix album. Like they don't have a label telling them what they can and can't do now. So is there something like more along those lines that you'd like to see? Because this opens up a lot of experimental possibilities for them.
I mean, I honestly don't care. I've always liked what they're doing, and even Release the Panic, which is probably my least favorite of their albums, I still really like, honestly. And like Gone, which was one of their more electronic albums, I still really like that album, and I still think they did really good with it. So I honestly don't care what they do. I feel like they can do whatever they want.
I will mention this though. I mean, part of why they're trying to transition into that format. There's a lot of other people who are doing this. I mean, the rap culture and scene has been doing this for years now, and they're starting to see some bands in this general audience, like bands like Bring Me the Horizon, are starting to do this, where they just release EPs or singles instead of traditional albums, because most people don't buy music anymore. I mean, there's always going to be people who do. I mean, there's people who still collect vinyl, so there's always going to be a market for people to buy like physical music. But the idea is that, I mean, if you're not selling albums anymore, then you have to be putting out music frequently and a lot of it in order to make money via streaming.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's kind of why it's exciting to see what they might do, because I know that they're kind of always writing, and they've put out a record every 2 or 3 years. But let's say that we get an EP of maybe like B-sides or something. They can just do whatever they want whenever they have new music. They don't have to wait around. Like, they originally weren't going to make a full length. They were going to do the Evening Hate EP, and then they were going to do another EP this year, which I would kind of explain why the Evening Hate takes up, a bit of the record. But yeah, I don't know. I think it opens up some cool possibilities. So I think the last thing I want to kind of touch on with you is, where do you think, and I know, like you mentioned, you've only listened to it all the way through, once?
Mm-hmm.
I've listened to it twice now. Where do you think it lies on your ranking of their albums?
I think it's too early to tell, honestly, because like I said, I want to familiarize myself with it more before I say. But I definitely like it more than Gone and Release the Panic. I mean, that's a fact.
Are those your least favorite Red albums?
Yeah. I still don't think you can beat Innocence and Instinct, but I probably I don't know. I mean, I probably like it more than End of Silence and Until We Have Faces, maybe. But I'm not quite sure where I would put it.
Okay. I think I'm kind of in the same boat. Like, I have a video up on the YouTube channel that you should check out. That's me ranking all of Red's albums, and it's just their first 6 albums. It was before we really knew it was before Evening Hate single even came out. So go check that video out. I think my opinion as far as that ranking still applies. And something I mentioned in that video is that I have a hard time accurately judging an album, because when it comes out, my hype is like really, really high, especially if it's a band I love, like Red. When it first comes out, I'm just excited to have new music. I'm not accurately judging it. So I'm like, oh, this is I remember when Of Beauty and Rage came out, I was like, this is my new favorite Red album. And now it's like towards the bottom of the list.
That's close to the top for me.
Yeah. So I don't know. Right now I'm going to say it's probably, based on how I know that I judge things after I've had some time to really think about it and let my hype die down and stuff, it's probably going to sit somewhere in the middle for me. Because, like I mentioned, I do like having some slower songs, but I think the album's short enough that doesn't really matter too much. And there's some ridiculously heavy stuff. Like, this is the heaviest material they've ever written. There's some they're actually like playing 7 strings and stuff and using ridiculously low tuning. I'm pretty sure All For You is in double drop C tuning, which even if you had like an 8-string guitar is pretty low. So yeah, it's cool though. If you, I can't imagine you'd be listening to this podcast if you hadn't checked out the album, but if you, for some reason haven't, go listen to it. And if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure to comment below what you actually think about it, and maybe where you would put it as far as your list of ranking Red's albums. So I think that's probably going to be it for the first episode of the All Things Christian Rock podcast. I'm just kind of trying this. I don't know how well this is going to work or what other episodes I might do. But I think as far as, as long as I can get 1 or 2 people in here to have a conversation about something, whether it's a new album, kind of like what this was, or maybe, down the line we could do like interviews or something like that and kind of format it like a podcast. I'm not really sure what I'll be able to do with this, but yeah, stay tuned. I hope you have enjoyed this. Like I said, links in the description to the New Music Spotify channel and the Facebook page. If you're listening to this on Spotify, check us out on YouTube. If you're listening to it on YouTube, check it out on Spotify. All that great stuff. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and God bless.